Hey guys, welcome to this week's extra special episode of Ute Dash. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Mora. I am the sports editor for the Daily Utah Chronicle here on the campus of the University of Utah. And today I am joined by the lovely Nathan Ackerman. How are you today, Nathan?
You know, I say this every week. This should be my own personal motto because I don't think anybody's ever heard it before, but I will believe it when I see it. Will this game happen? I don't know. I feel like it's going to get canceled like tomorrow morning. But as of now, we have football to talk about, and I could not be more excited.
I'm gonna remain optimistic and be like, we're getting the football game just because I'm so football hungry at this point. It's been a long wait for Utah fans.
Yeah, I mean we've had two games to enjoy, but I can't imagine what those first 2 weeks were like when you didn't have any football to talk about. That must have been really disappointing.
It was very painful, very painful.
I can imagine.
But we're gonna get rid of the pain and we're gonna look forward, and we're gonna talk about what matchups are we looking forward to tomorrow, because there's going to be a game tomorrow. We're remaining optimistic on this episode of Ute Dash.
So there will be a game tomorrow, and there will be a Utah starting quarterback as well. We don't know who that's going to be. So one of the matchups that I'm looking out for is Kedon Slovis versus fill in the blank, and whoever that's going to be, I'm sure is going to be a very intriguing matchup for the Trojans and the Utes, because USC's defense this year has looked, I don't know. I'm not entirely sold. The defensive improvement under Todd Orlando has been marginal at best. They obviously, USC is prone to playing down to their opponents, and Utah is obviously a good opponent. So maybe things turn around naturally this week, but especially if Utah decides to throw out a dual threat QB in there, which I think that they probably should do because USC has trouble with those kinds of quarterbacks. USC is going to be in for a really fun night, and they're going to have to turn some things around in order to slow them. So Kedon Slovis, of course, always really fun to watch. Looked kind of up and down early on to start this 2020 schedule, but he's still like 71.4 completion rate. He has like 3-1 touchdown to picks, and he's throwing for like 353 yards per game. So I guess he's been good, and I think he's only going to get better, but that matchup is definitely going to be an intriguing one. We have a comment in the chat that said they just got on the plane. Yes, they did. We are very excited about that. And, I think the game's going to happen. I was a little too pessimistic in my tone, but this game's going to happen, and I can't wait.
I am so excited. I'm just excited. I'm just so happy to have Utah football back. But I think a matchup, a lot of people have talked about this matchup. I think it's worth bringing up is Slovis versus this Utah secondary, because this Utah secondary is brand new. Bunch of freshmen and sophomores out there playing. I said it before that this was kind of my worst case scenario for Utah to start the season versus USC. But I'll talk about that in a little bit later. We'll get into that. But I still think this is going to be really interesting to see how this secondary responds to playing against Slovis. You said he's had his up and down moments already at this point in the season. I think if he can find a soft spot in this Utah secondary, I think he's going to expose it for a good chunk of the night. But Utah is really good at making those second half adjustments, so I think that's going to be key in this game. But another matchup I'm really looking forward to, you kind of touched on already, is USC's rush defense. That linebacking core, we were kind of talking a little bit pre-show about that linebacking core. Yeah. We have 4 really good running backs. Plus, there's the thought that we might be playing a dual threat quarterback in Cam Rising, because we still don't know who's starting. Yeah. But 4 running backs who all run very differently for Utah. Plus, you have Britton Covey, who is back at 100%, who might be running the jet sweep and might be doing a lot more from the backfield. I think that's going to be really fun to watch, because I think if Utah can find ways to break down this USC defense as the night goes on, it's going to be a long one for USC.
Yeah, and before this season, well, I guess technically for the Utes, the season has not quite kicked off yet. But in the weeks leading up to it, I was sort of thinking, I don't know if Utah is going to be all that great this year, because they were losing a lot of key starters on both sides of the ball, but especially, of course, Zach Moss was one of those guys. But looking at the running back core right now, it's probably not going to be as good because, Moss is in the NFL. But I don't know if it's going to take that huge of a step back. And they are going to have the opportunity to exploit a linebacking core that has not been good at all this year. I've said on previous Trojan Dash shows that I don't know what the defensive game plan is, and to be honest, I don't know if there has been a defensive game plan to this point. They allowed 30 points against Arizona, 27 against Arizona State, and the Sun Devils are good. The Wildcats are not. That really should not have happened. But also, I'm looking at that rushing attack versus SC's line on the defensive side because they have some guys hurt, right? Tui Pelotu, Drake Jackson have been really good up to this point. But the line as a whole has sort of struggled with finishing plays behind the line of scrimmage. And if that's going to be something that happens again this game, they're going to shoot right past that into a middle of the field with no linebackers in sight. And I think if Utah's going to win this game, it's going to be because they rush for something like, the 210 yards that they rushed against 247, I think, that they rushed against the Trojans last year. There's 210 on the receiving side. So
we still lost that game.
Yeah, and because the game plan for that game was Matt Fink throws up the ball and hopes somebody comes down with it, and Michael Pittman was down there somewhere, and he usually did. But again, if Utah is going to have an effective offense in this game, and if they're going to come out on top, it's going to be because the rushing attack, again, did not take that much of a step back from 2019, and because USC's defensive front and the linebacking core is just not. I mean, it's fine. The defensive front has been good, but they're dealing with some injured starters right now, and the linebacking core has not been all that great. We have a comment from Scott in the chat saying that Utah is a fast team. This is definitely true, and that's the kind of team that USC struggles with. I mean, dual threat quarterbacks, even people that like remotely know how to use their legs at all, have just like destroyed this for the last 3 years. And they're going to need to get that fixed at some point because they're not going to win a Pac-12 championship without it. And Scott's also saying the only team I'm worried about pre-championship game is Colorado. I'm going to have to disagree with that. I think Utah is a formidable opponent for the Trojans. I think that UCLA, anything can happen in a rivalry game. And Colorado is good, but I don't know if they've quite been tested yet. So we will see what happens in that game. But yeah, they probably won't rush for 200 yards if we contain their quarterback. But again, that is a big if because dual threat quarterbacks are USC's kryptonite. So they're going to have to turn that around or else they're going to be fighting a very uphill battle.
I would just like to add also, a good rush game starts with a good offensive line, and Utah has that. Yeah. Utah's offensive line had some shaky moments last year, but this year, this offensive line Utah has is legit. You have Nick Ford, who has been pumped. He is ready to step out on the field and play. You have Nick Ford, you have Orlando Umana, you have a lot of these guys. We even have a true freshman in Jaron Kump who's taking 1 reps. And he's really good. And he just got back from his mission, which is a big deal. But it starts with a good offensive line, and Utah only had to replace 1 starter on their offensive line this year. That's huge for this team. And a good rush offense starts with a good offensive line, and Utah has that. And this offensive line has experience too. So if they can create holes for their running backs, whether it be Devin Brumfield or Jordan Wilmore, or even Jake Bentley or Cam Rising, they can run. But also, I think whoever the quarterback is going to be able to throw the ball too, because Utah has some really good wide receivers and tight ends.
Yeah, and you talked about whether the Utes can slow Keaton Slovis, and on the flip side, USC's offensive line this year has been. I think I wrote about this in a column a few days ago. I said it's basically been Elijah Vera Tucker and a bunch of traffic cones, especially on the right side, and whatever the defensive back group looks like, the wide receivers, SC's wide outs, are certainly going to present a challenge for the Utes as well. It's not just Keaton Slovis. But again, this all comes back to the fact that if the wide receivers and if Keaton Slovis don't have time to work, if the pocket's going to collapse around them the entire game like it has in most of the first 2, particularly the first half against Arizona, it just looked particularly weak. This is going to be a tough game. So I think matchup-wise, the Utes have a lot of things going for them. I think overall USC is probably the more talented team, but Utah's strengths can play to a lot of USC's weaknesses. And I think that's going to be a theme that could decide the outcome of this game.
For sure. And Scott in the chat just said Utah's hungry. It's their first game. That's a perfect transition into the second topic.
Yep.
Is this game really a rivalry this year? I know in years past, this game usually it's very hyped up. It's very much Utah USC. This is for all of the marbles. And I usually would agree and say, yes, this is a rivalry. But I think that this Utah team and Utah fans in general just want to see Utah play. I don't think they care who the opponent is at this point. They just want to play. And like I already mentioned it briefly, like this was my worst fear, starting against USC. But I think actually Utah might have an edge.
Yeah.
That might be a hot take because we have 2 weeks of film of USC to look at and use, and USC has nothing.
Yeah.
None on us. Like you're using stuff from last year's team. You're circling people that are back on the team this year. But Andy Ludwig, I'm looking at this as at an offensive perspective. Andy Ludwig schemes to his personnel. And yeah, like we have a lot of the same personnel that we had last year, but we also have new personnel too. Like Dalton Kincaid, the transfer from San Diego. I'm really excited to see him play. I think he's going to add a lot to this Utah. And I think Utah has the edge.
Yeah, Utah definitely has the edge. And I think the other thing that's going to make this somewhat of a rivalry game this year, despite the fact that, of course, there will be no fans at the stadium, is the fact that this game could be for the Pac-12 South. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really see any way in which the loser of this game finds a way into the Pac-12 championship game. I mean, of course, if Utah especially gets more games canceled due to COVID or whatever, and they only end up playing 4 tops, maybe even fewer than that games, it's going to present some tricky ways to, sort of figure out the schedule and who represents the Pac-12 South in the Pac-12 championship game. But all of that aside, I mean, I don't really see Utah losing 2 other games, or I don't really see USC losing 2 other games before the Pac-12 title game. So if this is a rivalry game, like, sure, because this is probably going to decide the Pac-12 South. So, yeah, I think it definitely probably this year is, and especially the fact that SC has not won a game in Salt Lake City, and I think their last 3, they've lost all of their last 3 trips there. So USC is definitely going to have an edge in that respect. So there are going to be a lot of edges on both sides of the ball. I think I expect to see a physical kind of chippy game. We'll see how that plays out as far as penalties go. USC has struggled with that in the first 2 games as well, so that certainly doesn't help their case in that regard either. So you know what, is this game a rivalry this year? I'm going to go yes, it is.
Yeah, I think, and I just want to go back to your point about Rice Eccles really fast. Rice Eccles is to the Trojans as the Coliseum is to Utah. It's you can't Utah can beat USC at home in like it's always a really close game and it's usually a nail biter and it's a good game, but there's just something about Utah at the Coliseum that they can't get over that hump. And I think it's kind of the same thing at USC. Like, yes, USC has won at Rice Eccles, but it's just something about playing in that atmosphere that shakes them up. But I also think Utah's in a really weird position right now because you have USC this week, and then you're scheduled to play Arizona State next week. But who knows if that game is even going to happen? Because what Arizona State's in shambles right now. So if Utah beats USC, but then USC beat Arizona State, but Utah didn't play Arizona State, who gets it?
Larry Scott's going to have a lot of things to figure out.
Larry Scott's going to put a blindfold on with like all 3 logos on a wall and throw a dart, and then whichever team he hits the dart is going to the championship game. I feel like that's something that I wouldn't be surprised that it comes out that he did.
And knowing USC's luck, I feel like there's less than a 33% chance that one will be SC. So all those are going to be intriguing storylines to watch later on. But again, I think that pretty much, barring any last minute COVID cancellations or any weird quirks with the schedule or anything like that, the winner of this game has a pretty clear path to the Pac-12 championship game. I mean, USC, the last 3 games are against Colorado, Washington State, and UCLA. Actually, all 3 teams which have looked better than I thought they would in the preseason, at least. Yeah. I mean, Colorado's 2-0. UCLA just took it to Cal. They put up like 42 points against Colorado in week 1. I think that was the matchup UCLA, Colorado. Yeah, they were down like 35-7 or something. came roaring back.
Wild.
And then Washington State, who like competed with Oregon for a sec. But again, I think USC is better than all of those teams. So they'll probably win each of those games. I don't know if they'll win all of them, but again, they would have to lose 2 of them if they were to, let's see, beat Utah and still win the Pac-12 South. So, barring any unforeseen, like I said, cancellations or anything like that with the schedule, that's going to. I mean, there's an incentive for every college football game to go out and win, especially for a guy like Clay Helton, whose job is probably on the line with each game this year. So that throws another little interesting twist in there, which is, I'm sure, fun for all USC fans to talk about. So yeah, this is a must-win game for like both teams involved, and like I don't know if the pressure is more on one side. I mean, USC certainly has some expectations to meet, but it also wouldn't look good for the Utes to come out. Presumably be pretty hungry after the first 2 weeks, get halted, and lay a dud. So I don't know. We'll see. I think this is going to be one of the more physical games, one of the more chippy games, one of the more heated games, one of the more exciting games that we're going to see from both teams all season.
This game's always chippy, and it's always one that I love to watch because it's so good. There's always an iconic moment that comes from it, no matter what. But one other thing I just want to add about this game is the kickoff temperature is supposed to be 30 degrees tomorrow here in Salt Lake, and
I'm not accustomed to that.
I am.
I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to be sitting in a closed press box, and I'm going to have a hard time with that.
I grew up here. I'm used to that, and that's my mentality. Is this going to get to USC? Because USC has played Utah in the snow before, and it hasn't been well for them. Yeah. And like, will the cold affect them? Because Utah, this is if you play football here, if you play anything here, you are used to playing in the snow and playing in the cold. I played soccer games with 3 inches of snow on the ground growing up. So I know that shouldn't be like a big thing that sways the game, but I have a feeling it's going to have an impact because guys are going to have to stay on the sidelines, like stay warm, like keep like Slovis is going to be like just making sure that arm doesn't like go cold on him this entire game.
Yeah.
So
I think and SC's 2 games this year have been in Los Angeles and Tucson. And granted, the Los Angeles one, it was like rainy and cold, whatever, but cold like 60 or something like that. So
that's like shorts weather here.
Yeah,
that is like shorts, flip flops, tank tops. We're going.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the Arizona game, his passes were looking wobbly. He was missing some guys. He was underthrowing, overthrowing some balls pretty much all game until the last 2 minutes. Well, even in the second to last drive, he almost threw a ball the last drive, he threw a ball that probably should have been picked, but it just evaded the defender's hands and tipped into Amon-Ra St. Brown's hands. So after the game, he was saying, or it was either Keaton or Clay was saying something like, yeah, it was like windy in Tucson, and like sometimes the wind, when it's like super dry, can like get to your hand or get to your arm or whatever. I'm not going to like try to invalidate that because I don't know what it's like being a college football quarterback. But my point is that if this is a situation where USC and Keaton Slovis are susceptible to some,
inclement weather.
Exactly. Whether that they're not quite used to playing in sunny California, sunny Los Angeles most of the year. Then it could definitely be something that affects them. I mean, we saw it in Colorado last year, right? They went to Boulder, and for the first 3 quarters, they did not look very good. I think they were losing by 3 points going into the 4th quarter. They might have been up 3. They might have been tied. Either way, Colorado was not good last year. That shouldn't have happened. And because of the altitude, I think they said after the game, like it took us a while to acclimate to that. And then once they figured it out, they ended up coming back, won by 3 points, won by 4 points, 35-31, I think it was, whatever. So I mean, that's definitely something that
Utah has the altitude and the cold. So
yeah, exactly. So like USC needs a game time field goal with 10 seconds left, and it's like freezing, which is like 20 degrees. It'll probably be 20 degrees by like 11 o'clock, and that's hard to kick in. So I don't know. We'll see. So Again, I think it all comes back to the offensive line. I think given that Utah's defensive backs are looking pretty strong this year, and given that USC is very dependent on the pass, talk about in a second as well, the offensive line is going to need to do a better job of protecting, uh, protecting the running game, protecting the quarterback, protecting whoever's in there, because that's where the whole offense really kind of stems from. And in the last two games, I think the offensive inconsistencies, I guess, the offensive, I don't know, the fact that they just haven't looked all that great is largely due to the offensive line. Ups and downs, yes, it's not, that's a nice way to put it. Has largely been due to the fact that, I mean, Keaton just hasn't really had time to work, and I think he hasn't looked quite comfortable yet because of that to this point. So the offensive line is going to need to do a better job of that. They're going to need to slow the ground attack, whether that's from the running backs or whatever dual threat, competent with the legs and even the most basic sense quarterback they put in there, because USC cannot allow 247 yards to the Utes again on the ground this year and expect to win. Even though they did it last year, that's not a really sustainable way of playing the sport. So they're going to need to do a better job both on the defensive line, overcoming some of those injured players, and also the linebackers are going to have to step up. And then number three is just going to be starting strong, because this is something that, USC, if any of those last two drives of each of their first two games are not a touchdown, they were probably 1-1 or 0-2. And those comebacks could happen because they were playing an Arizona State team who is good, but the defense is not like phenomenal, and a Arizona Wildcats team that's just not that good. Probably not going to work against the Utes if they need to come back from down 2 or 3 touchdowns in, like I said, 25-degree weather by that point. So they're going to need to figure out how to start off strong. That doesn't even mean, going up 3 touchdowns by the means like getting the offense consistent, getting the rhythm down, getting the tempo down, all those sorts of things, and obviously not letting the scoreboard get out of hand. I think if they can do those 3 things, they're going to leave very happy. Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think taking care of the ball is going to be, I mean, obviously that's a key to the game for the Trojans as well. And that's mainly because of the fact that in the first game, they turned the ball over 4 times and they won by 1 point. And really, in hindsight, should they have won that game? Like, probably not. It took a couple fortunate bounces. I won't use the word luck, but it took a couple fortunate bounces late and a onside kick for them to ultimately hold on. And then in the Arizona, they turned over the ball 0 times and they won because of a last second touchdown with 25 seconds left, and they won by 4 points. So if they had turned the ball over once that game, maybe they lose that game too. I think Clay Helton said that in the post game press conference. He said that if we turn the ball over once, we might not win that game, and I fully agree. They're going to have to take care of the ball again tomorrow. And I think the other thing for SC is, I mean, this is obvious, but it's preparation, because you don't know what you're going to get from this Utah team. I mean, the defense is just totally new look. They haven't even played yet, so you don't know what they're going to look like. You don't know who's starting at quarterback. Like, you don't know what the running back situation exactly is going to look like, whether they do, one man in the backfield for the majority of the snaps, whether they do a committee type thing. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. So we'll have to see all that. But okay, right, of course. Of course. So, I mean, but who's going to share, the brunt of what kind of snaps, and when are they going to use certain guys for, short yardage, long? What, we don't know any of that. And I think it's something that or I don't know any of that. At least maybe I'm behind, but we're going to have to see all of that play out. Yeah, and USC can't allow itself to be caught off guard by that, right? They can't come out of the gate and say, "Oh, well, we didn't know that." Rising was going to be starting at QB, and now he's just like running all over us. Like, there's no way we could have known this. Like, that's not an excuse. That's just good coaching by the Utes. I think Witt obviously is known for being kind of secretive about these kinds of things, and I think he was talking a couple days ago about, like, why would we tip our hand? Like, what good does that do us? And frankly, he's totally right. Yeah, and he's totally right, frankly. Like, he's kept this thing in a vault for the last, like, several weeks, which I'm frankly am very impressed by. So USC can't allow themselves to be caught off guard by that. They need to be prepared for whatever comes their way, because if they come out slow and they're hit with something that they didn't see coming and they're down 14 points at halftime, like I said, probably not going to be able to come back, because this team is a good team. And yeah, and then on the defensive side, we haven't seen them play. They talked a lot before the Arizona game about how the whole coaching staff is, like, new. We don't know the schemes that they're going to run. It seems like pretty much everybody's just going to do drop 8 against the Trojans this year because of that passing attack. So they need to be ready for that. They need to be ready for really whatever comes their way. They need to be able to exploit inexperienced players on the defensive side of the ball, and they need to establish the ground game. I don't know why I didn't say that in one of my keys to victory, because that's been the most confusing thing about this offense in the first 2 games to this point, is that the running backs in like on their own, they're good, they're talented, like, they are good football players at the college level. I don't know why they don't use them more, and when you don't use them, then it's hard for the passing game to fully get into full gear. And everything just kind of derails from there, because that's what this offense is. So they need to establish the ground attack. They need to be ready for whatever comes their way on both sides of the ball. And if they can do those things, take care of the ball, not let the weather get to them. I'm listing like 7 things and saying if they do all these things, then they should be good. But those are all things that they're capable of doing. So I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. 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 And I think, I mean, I was watching Bentley's highlights, and he's a stud. Like he's a great passer. And then Rising is a dual threat, which USC struggles with. So I don't know if there's really a wrong choice for Utah here. And I'm sure he's a good passer as well. Like I haven't seen him, work that much, but I'm sure he's fine there. All right, score predictions. I'll make this quick. I'm gonna go 31-24 Trojans. Okay. I kind of saw this playing out the way that it did. Yeah. The first game, I think, might present more of a challenge for Utah than a positive, I guess. I mean, they will have the edge for sure. But it is always difficult playing in that first game, so we'll see. Yeah, Sam and I will be back on Sunday at 3 or 4. I'm forgetting the time we do our show. I think it's 3. We'll be back. Talk about whatever happens tomorrow night. No. I'm kind of scared. I have a lot riding on this game. Like I told a lot of BYU fans that don't worry, we will beat Utah. So I'm not going to be too confident on that. Yeah, I'm just going to say, you know what, whatever happens, happens. Fight on if that's your thing. I won't say go Utes. I promise you, I won't say that.